Hey everyone, hope you had a fantastic weekend. I am back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about the top 10 JRPGs that I feel aged very well. So a couple weeks ago, or last week, we did a video on the top 10 JRPGs that aged poorly, but I wanted to focus on the flip side of that. Some of the JRPGs that, despite being quite old, some of them on the Super NES and so on, still stand up quite strongly today, and honestly don't really feel their age at all. So if you guys enjoy top 10 videos, reviews, podcasts, Dragon Quest videos, all that good stuff, please remember to like, subscribe, turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next video. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and with your help, it's possible. Alright, with that out of the way, let's begin.
Number 10.
Here at number 10 is Breath of Fire 4. Breath of Fire 4 is one of the most beautiful sprite-based games I think I've ever had the pleasure to play. I know in previous videos I've said how I'm not the biggest Breath of Fire fan. I don't hate the series or anything like that, but the way they were hyped up to me is that they were like one of the bigs. Like, I put them on the same level as like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. When I finally got around to actually playing the series, I've just felt incredibly disappointed. But I do feel like I think 4 is the best of the bunch. Even like visually, this game is magnificent. Like the graphics, the art style, the sprites themselves are just absolutely beautiful. I would love to see this game out of all the Breath of Fire games, or honestly any PS1 game. I think this one would look so good as an HD remaster because of how nice the sprites already look in standard definition. If they clean this up to a high definition resolution, this would be an even more gorgeous and beautiful game. So I feel like, as far as like gameplay and stuff, the combat's a lot smoother, it's a lot quicker. I remember not liking the way the dragon transformations worked in this compared to some of the other ones, but overall, Breath of Fire 4 is a fantastically aged game.
Number 9.
At number 9, we've got Phantasy Star 4 on the Sega Genesis. Not a lot of Genesis JRPGs, I feel, stand the test of time. I mean, especially like the early Genesis games, they always have like that kind of grayish, dark color palette. Phantasy Star 4 kind of has a bit of that grayish, dark color palette, but it kind of suits the game because it's got that futuristic tech look to it. The story, the characters, the twists, might I add, are something reminiscent of a Super NES era Final Fantasy game, to be honest. Like, this game, I would put this right up there with some of the best that the Final Fantasy series and the Dragon Quest series have to offer. I don't know if I'd quite put it on that level, but it would be just under that. There's a series I'll get to near the end of this video that I would really put up there with like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and stuff on the Super NES. I feel like Phantasy Star 4 is kind of like just below something like Final Fantasy 4 and Final Fantasy 5 and 6, you know what I mean? Like, those are absolute banger games, and so is Phantasy Star 4. The twist honestly hit me really hard. I did not see it coming whatsoever, and yeah, I just recommend anyone who's kind of ever considered checking out the Phantasy Star series to play 4. If you're not a fan of like old school JRPGs, I think you'll still like Phantasy Star 4.
Number 8.
Now, it's funny because some of the comments in my top 10 JRPGs that aged poorly video mentioned Final Fantasy Tactics as being unbalanced and stuff like that, and I do agree in that aspect. It is definitely unbalanced, but depending on the game, I kind of like being able to break the game. That's like one of my favorite things to do in JRPGs. It's probably why I like Final Fantasy VIII so much. I love the customization that you can do. I love the story in this game is absolutely incredible and ahead of its time. It's like this heart-wrenching political story with good and bad guys on both sides, and just showing the absolute travesties of war and how it completely preys on like the lower and middle class, while the higher class citizens are able to just sit in the comfort of their castles and watch the war below them. The story, the characters, the customization is unreal in this game. So it's like taking a tactical RPG and then adding Final Fantasy V's job class system, but adding like a crap load more depth to even Final Fantasy V's job class system. And then once you like learn certain abilities from that job class, you can carry those across to other job classes, and it's just an absolutely incredible game. I can't recommend Final Fantasy Tactics enough, and this is coming from a guy that doesn't generally like tactical RPGs. Like, probably the only ones I've ever really liked are Tactics Ogre Reborn. I did not like the original Tactics Ogre. It was way too hard for me. And then Tactics Ogre The Knight of Lotus on the Game Boy Advance was another fantastic tactical RPG. And Vandal Hearts. Vandal Hearts was pretty good too on the PS1. But Final Fantasy Tactics, among the best the Final Fantasy series has to offer. I would put it in my top three or four Final Fantasy games of all time, honestly. So check this one out, even if you are a little rocky on tactical RPGs.
Number 7.
At number 7 is Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver on the Nintendo DS. I got into Pokemon with Gen 1. We talked about that in my top 10 JRPGs that aged poorly video. I loved it, honestly. As a kid, I would borrow it from my buddy Paul. I would borrow, I don't know if it was his or his younger brother's Game Boy or Game Boy Color, and I would borrow the game and play it all night long. It was like your typical playing the game underneath the covers and all that stuff. It was just, I loved it so much. And then when Gold and Silver came out, we played the crap out of Gold and Silver. And to me, Gold and Silver is kind of like the pinnacle as far as like the original games go. It was an entirely new experience. There was new Pokemon, a whole new region. And keep in mind, this was the first time there was a sequel to Pokemon, so we didn't know what to expect from a sequel of a Pokemon game. It was a whole new adventure, a whole new world to explore, and we loved it. We had a blast with it. We met new Pokemon that I still love to this day, like Heracross, Cyndaquil, and then Gen 3, I was not a fan of. I remember when you beat Pokemon Gold and Silver, you got to go back to Kanto and kind of see how Kanto changed over the last couple of years. And it was just cool to be able to beat the game and then go back and to your old stomping grounds and see what everything's up to there and kind of just dominate there and then face off against basically your character from the first game at the very end of the game as like a super boss post-game fight kind of thing. That was so incredible. So then when Gen 3 came out, I wasn't a fan of a lot of the Pokemon designs, and there wasn't as many of the old ones in Gen 3. I wasn't a big fan of it. And then when my buddy Paul beat the game and he said you don't even go back to Kanto or Johto, I was like, well, that's kind of crappy. That's kind of a cop-out, because to us at that time, that's what happened. After you beat Gen 2, you would go back to the previous region and see how that's doing and kind of beat all the gyms there and face the Elite Four again. So that was kind of the standard that we held the series to at the time. And so when they cut that out, that was like a huge detriment to the series in my book and to many of my friends' books at the time. So I kind of dropped the Pokemon series after that. And then when Soul Silver and Heart Gold came out on the DS, I was like, you know what? I want to pick this bad boy up because it looked fantastic, and it still does. It holds up very well today. You're still missing out on things like the full team EXP share that I think was introduced in Pokemon X and Y. All the sprites have been like redone, because remember in the classics you would have like, there was like maybe like 6 or 7 sprites in the actual, like when you'd look at your list of Pokemon, and they would all look like the same pretty much and not like the Pokemon at all. They had like all the sprites done for all the Pokemon, because this time the Pokemon could walk along with you no matter what Pokemon it was. In Pokemon Yellow, it was only Pikachu, but in this, whatever your Pokemon was that was at the front of the line got to run around with you. So I got to run around with like Cyndaquil and Heracross and stuff like that, and it was just, dude, it was so good. I loved it so much. Revisiting Johto, everything was so well done. Lugia is like one of my favorite legendaries. This game really took everything that Pokemon Gold and Silver had to offer and added a few like quality of life improvements, and it was just a fantastic, incredible remake, and it's still to this day my favorite Pokemon game of all time.
Number 6.
Now, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but Final Fantasy IV on the Super NES has aged incredibly well. I would have put this way higher at the list, but the Super NES version, the one that came to North America here, was heavily censored. I believe it even took out like the darkness attacks and stuff for the Dark Knight, which kind of like what's the point of a Dark Knight if you can't do the darkness attacks? But overall, though, Final Fantasy IV has always been like tied with Final Fantasy IX as my favorite game in the series. The story's incredible, the characters are magnificent, and it's just like the journey. I feel like Final Fantasy IV probably has the best pacing in the series as well. The game just kind of grabs you from the balls right from the get-go and just drags you through it. Like, everything's happening like one thing after another. I love Final Fantasy IV so much. I still prefer the PS1 version, but I know a lot of people complain about the load times. I mostly grew up playing JRPGs on the PS1, so load times weren't a huge deal to me, but I completely understand why people complain. But to me, it's the original Super NES game with all the censorship and stuff taken out of it, and the translation was done much, much better. And it wasn't as easy. Apparently, the Super NES version was like kind of dumbed down for the American audience or whatever, so they made it a lot easier. But yeah, even the Super NES version of Final Fantasy IV has aged very well, and I recommend it to anyone who loves JRPGs and hasn't played it yet.
Number 5.
Here at number 5 is Suikoden 2. Now, the Suikoden games, I've only played 1 and 2, and I loved them both. I feel like you should play 1 and 2 because there's connections to the two of them, and I feel like if you're going to play 2, to get the most out of it, you should play the first one. Now, there is a HD remake coming out of both Suikoden 1 and 2, so I think the developers would agree with me that you should probably play both, but we're just talking about Suikoden 2 today. Suikoden 2 is a game that you build like a community, and it's about war, of course, but it's about kind of like overcoming difficulty together, finding a group of like-minded people who are fighting for a cause and grouping them together to build a better society. And it's just, I don't know, the villain is so well done. Like, Luca Blight is such a piece of crap, and it feels so satisfying to finally beat the absolute shit out of this guy. Now, when I played through the game, I used the squirrels. I didn't know, man. It was my first playthrough, and I'm a big fan of like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider and stuff like that. So I had the Super Squirrel Squad plus the main character as my party, pretty much. It was a blast, but I didn't realize it would make the game that difficult not having like regular party members, because the squirrels are kind of freaking useless. There was like 1 or 2 of them that were kind of decent, but I ended up basically soloing the game with my main character. Either way, fantastic game. I love the squirrels, man. Like, this is another thing that made it age so well. Just the comedy in this game, and the characters are also really well done. Not all the characters are going to be in your party, like in battle, but they might have a shop in your town that you build. They might increase the ability to like maneuver troops and stuff like that, because there's also like a tactical battle element to the game. Now, those of you that don't like tactical RPGs, don't worry too much. The tactical battles are pretty simple, pretty basic, and they're pretty far and few between. But overall, man, I loved, there was like the 2 fisherman brothers in the first game. Those guys were so good. Unfortunately, I think only one of them joined your party in battle in this one, but the other one would help you fish back in your town. I think other things that add to the quality of life for this one is the fact that like all your characters, all 6 of them, attack all at the same time pretty much. So nowadays, a lot of games have like an auto battle feature or a sped up battle feature. You don't even really need that for Suikoden 2, because all your characters are just attacking immediately, and then all the enemies are attacking immediately too. You put in all your commands, and then boom, they just all go off on each other. It just makes the battles go by so much quicker if you're well prepared. If you're not well prepared, then it's going to be a little slower anyways, but you're going to have to strategize a little bit to make your way to the win. All the character sprites are so well done too. I feel like the artwork for this game has really aged well, and the music's incredible. And yeah, I think the only downside I would say, and most people would disagree with me here, is that you can't really grind. So once you hit like a specific level, the game figures like what level you should be in the story, and then you'll get like little to no EXP from monsters to kind of keep you from like just blowing through everyone in the story. And I kind of understand, like, it makes the story feel more real, because if you're struggling against a boss you're supposed to struggle against, it makes a lot more sense than if in the story this guy's like so difficult and powerful and you just blow right through him. But I'm the kind of guy that likes to just over level. I love to grind, so that was the only downside to me. But overall, this game has a ton of great twists, a fantastic story, and a ton of characters you can recruit. I think there's like 108 characters, and you get different endings depending on what characters you chose and stuff like that. Anyways, check out Suikoden 2 on the PS1. Heck, just wait a little bit and get yourself the remaster of Suikoden 1 and 2 HD coming out soon.
Number 4.
At number 4 is Final Fantasy X. Now, this was a kind of a tough one to put on here because they did do an HD remaster of both Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2, and I do feel like the remaster looks worse than the original PS2 game. So that's kind of why I put it on here, but that's also kind of why, like, it was hard to put it on here, if that makes sense. I don't know. The original character models look way better in my opinion, but when I don't know if they, like, lost the assets. Somebody in the comments tell me why did they redesign, like, the characters' faces, because they look not that great in the remaster, but fantastic in the original. This game is gorgeous. The tropical theme, the colors are super lush. There's almost like a blue and white and kind of green theme to most of the game. But then you've got like the sunsets. I think the locations are what make this game stand out so much. You've got like the Thunder Plains, the lighting, the environments. The characters are really well done. The combat is probably the peak of Final Fantasy combat. It's essentially using the combat system that the Dragon Quest series started using back in like Dragon Warrior 4 on the NES, where you're allowed to kind of swap party members in and out of battle from the back party, or like the wagon as we'd call it as Dragon Quest fans, into the front party based on how useful they are at each stage in the battle, and there's no punishment for it. You literally swap them in and out, can use them as you wish. Each character has their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's just a fantastic game. Blitzball is freaking fantastic. Let me know if you guys want me to do a guide on how to play Blitzball. I still swear that most people who hate Blitzball just don't know how to play Blitzball, alright? Blitzball's the best mini game. Not the best, but it's up there. Anyways, I love Final Fantasy X. The story is incredible. I think as an entry point to the Final Fantasy series, Final Fantasy X is one of the top ones I would recommend, just because of how kind of linear the game is. If you're gonna get somebody into it and you don't want to like overwhelm them, I think Final Fantasy X is one of the best places to start. And I just think overall Final Fantasy X is one of the best aged games of all time.
Number 3.
Sticking to the PS2, we've got Dragon Quest VIII. I still hear people today claim that Dragon Quest VIII was like the peak of the franchise. I disagree because I think Dragon Quest XI is, and there are definitely other Dragon Quest games I like more than 8, like I like 4 and 7 and stuff like that. But Dragon Quest VIII, from a presentation standpoint, is absolutely stunning. This was the first time that like Enix had the funds and the technology to kind of bring forth fully 3D realized environment for the player to explore. And exploration and adventure has always been like the top priority for the Dragon Quest games. They really nail it here in their first 3D outing. Every location feels different and unique, and even the ones that do seem similar, when you go and talk to the townsfolk and stuff like that, they really separate themselves from one another. The monster designs look incredible in 3D. It's just so amazing being able to see all these characters that we loved back on like the NES, fully 3D and animated to perfection. And then they had the monster arena where you could recruit monsters and basically call them into battle with you if you needed to. Battle in the monster arena and win tournaments and stuff like that. The characters in this game, man, some of the most memorable characters in the entire series, and heck, some of the most memorable characters in the entirety of JRPGs, in my opinion. Like, who can forget Yangus? Like, Yangus is the best. And then Jessica, everybody loves Jessica, and Angelo's kind of like that soft-hearted but strong-willed, kind of self-proclaimed ladies man. He truly is the Irvine from Final Fantasy VIII of Dragon Quest VIII. If you haven't played Dragon Quest VIII yet, though I believe most of you probably have, be sure to give this one a go.
Number 2.
Alright, at number 2, I kind of mentioned this earlier in the video when I said there's going to be one other game that I do sit along with the best Dragon Quest and the best Final Fantasy has to offer, and that is the Lunar series on the PlayStation 1. So we got Lunar Silver Star Story Complete and Lunar 2 Eternal Blue Complete on the PlayStation 1. They're remakes of a Sega CD duology, and I do believe that these are the best versions of the Lunar series. The first Lunar game has been remade like a million times on like Game Boy, I think PSP, pretty much, I think, anything you can get your hands on, you can get a version of it, but I do strongly believe that this is the best version of the game. Now, the combat has been streamlined a lot better in this, whereas the Sega CD version, you had to kind of move your character a set amount of spaces. In this one, if you just want to attack a monster, he'll move as many set spaces as he can to get to that monster to reach him in order to do that damage. The cutscenes, the music, the characters, everything has aged wonderfully in this game. These games are easily among the best the JRPG franchise has to offer, and I highly recommend you guys check them out if you haven't yet.
Number 1.
Now, last but not least, you guys knew it was going to be in here somewhere, but you didn't know where. I'm talking about Chrono Trigger. Now, I might like Lunar 1 and 2 more than Chrono Trigger, but I think as far as aging perfectly, I think Chrono Trigger had to be at the top of the heap. Keep in mind, this is a Super NES game. It came out kind of near the end-ish of the Super NES. It stands the test of time quite easily. They kind of do away with random encounters. You can avoid battles quite easily if you know where the enemies are going to come out, if you've been to that area before. They added dual techs and triple techs, which are basically abilities where you can combine the abilities of 2 or more characters to do these super powerful abilities. All the characters are really, really well done. The story is good. It's not the best story gaming has to offer, but I always say that Chrono Trigger is basically a Dragon Quest game, and it really is. The storytelling is much more in line with what Dragon Quest was doing at the time and still really doing today than it is with what the Final Fantasy series has ever done. In that you go from location to location, and in this case time period to time period and location to location, and you kind of learn about each little town and community and see what's troubling them and do your best to resolve their issues. By doing so, resolving some of your own. You get kind of the vibe and feel of all these different time periods and locations by interacting with the NPCs and characters in them. It just gives you a feeling of comfort, a feeling of home. The sprite-based art style looks incredible. Akira Toriyama really, really shines in this one. The music is top-notch. Some of the best music of all time is in Chrono Trigger, in my opinion. It's just everything about this game. There's nothing really that feels dated in this game, to be completely honest. Kind of like Final Fantasy IV, the pacing is on point. You're always working towards something. You never feel like there's a lull in the action. In fact, the only thing I would ever really knock on this game is I really don't like this stupid racing minigame against Johnny. I did a video on my top 5 best and worst JRPG minigames, so you can check that out if you want more information on that. Anyways, Chrono Trigger, absolute masterpiece in my opinion. Probably not my favorite game on this list, but definitely the one that has aged the best. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed the video and you haven't yet, please remember to like, subscribe, turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next video. I'm trying to do some weekly content for you guys, and if you like that and want to support me getting to that 5,000 subscribers, help me out by sharing this to some of your friends or anyone you think would enjoy this as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.